It is great to be in Brown County. Wow. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for, oh, what a wonderful welcome. I appreciate that. Let me introduce you to somebody else here. This is my son, John, who's traveling with me. I never let John just stand behind me and smile the whole time, so you can leave and get off the stage, John, if you don't want to. And thank you so much. I want to thank Jean Smith. She's the reason I'm here. You can't say no to Jean Smith. That's all there is to it. So, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. Oh, please sit down. I'm going to talk for about 2 hours. So, all right? We up for that? All right. Well, thank you so much again for having me here. It is what a wonderful turnout. I appreciate everybody coming out and certainly welcome me here to a river county. I come from southwestern Pennsylvania, just upriver from Brown County. Grew up in outside of Pittsburgh and represented a congressional district that included the Ohio River. So we have a connection to all of southern Ohio counties, and it's great to be here and really the heartland of America. And as you know, my roots and where I come from in southwestern Pennsylvania, I come from a steel town. My grandfather was a coal miner. My dad worked all his life with the Veterans Administration, serving our veterans. And I know I see some folks out there, and I wanted to thank our ROTC Color Guard. And Colonel, thank you so much for the great service you're providing. Thank you. But it's been a great journey to get here. It's been a fun day today. I spent the earlier part of the day in the state of Michigan and talking to folks up there, and they've got a primary just a week before you do, and then obviously here in the Keystone State. I hate to say that because I'm from Pennsylvania, but right now, so as Ohio goes, so goes the nation. So how's Ohio going to go? Well, thank you very much. I am truly excited to be in a position right now where I think we're building some momentum, that people are beginning to recognize that there is a real choice. There's a real choice in this election. We can have someone who's our nominee, who can make Barack Obama and his failed policies the issue in this election. And that's how we're going to win. I just want to share with you some thoughts about a whole variety of different issues because, this campaign is about big things. It's not just about, the economy. It's not just about national security. It's not just about the state of our culture and our families. It's really about something bigger, something more fundamental. It's really the heart and soul of America. Because we have a president right now who doesn't see America for the greatness that it is. Doesn't see America and the American people. Sees America as groups of folks, interest groups, to pit one against the other. Doesn't see Americans for the greatness of the human potential that we have. Doesn't see America for the greatness that we built in our founding documents. The President of the United States said just at the beginning of his term, he was asked, there was this discussion, you may remember, about American exceptionalism. And he was asked whether he believed that America was exceptional. And this is what the president said. Well, I believe America is exceptional, just like the Greeks believe that Greeks are exceptional and the British believe that the Brits are exceptional. Well, if everybody's exceptional, nobody's exceptional. And of course, if it's just, we all believe we're great, but really we're no better than anybody else. That's how Barack Obama sees America. I also, you got to listen to what Ruth Bader Ginsburg said the other day. She's a Supreme Court justice. And she was asked the question, if you were going to, she was over, with her good friends across the pond. And she was asked the question about whether, if you were starting a new country, would you base that country on the U.S. Constitution? And she said, no, I wouldn't. This is a Supreme Court justice. a proud member of the Obama left. She said, no, I wouldn't do that. She went through a whole bunch of different constitutions. She said, oh, I think maybe the South African. The United States Constitution is outdated. It's outdated. We need something that's more modern. See, that's how they view America. Something that at its core isn't great, but it's something that they can hope to improve. Something that they can refashion in an image that is consistent with their values, not the values that constructed the greatest country in the history of the world. And you see it in all of the policies of this administration. You see it with our actions overseas. The President of the United States going around in his first trip around the world, in the world and overseas, apologizing for America, saying that America had made mistakes. Well, yeah, America may have made mistakes, but the President of the United States doesn't go to other countries and talk about the mistakes that our country makes. Our country has done more for humankind, for freedom, for liberty, for human rights, for the increase in the quality of life for the entire world than any country in the history of the world, and we have nothing to apologize for. But you see it in the way he treats our friends and our enemies. You actually have a hard time, it's actually very easy to see that anybody that he treats well is our enemy, anybody he treats poorly is our friend. That's how the president deals with our allies. Uniformly so. We're now in a dispute and got the United Kingdom, our friends, our closest ally, is now a little honked off at us. Why? Well, because the Falkland Islands. Remember under Ronald Reagan there was a war. Maggie Thatcher sent and made sure that the Falkland Islands stayed in British control. Why? Because 90% of the people in the Falkland Islands are British. Well, Argentina, because of the proximity to the island, says, no, this is our land. And so what did Ronald Reagan do? He stood by Maggie Thatcher. What does Barack Obama do? What did Barack Obama do? Oh, it's disputed territory. That's not what friends do. Friends don't stand up and say that at a time when their country, their existence is in potential jeopardy, like the state of Israel, we don't isolate them by criticizing them for building settlements in Jerusalem. We don't criticize them for blockading so weapons and other types of folks don't come into their country to cause harm. And we don't tell the world that they're planning an attack on Iran and their nuclear sites because we get information from them that our allies thought was safe to keep with another friend, and then hold them up for scorn to the world for protecting their very existence. This is a president that you can go through country after country, whether it's the UK. You really want to insult the United Kingdom. He did this better than any president could possibly do. He actually went to France a year or so ago and was with Nicolas Sarkozy and said that here I am with the French Prime Minister, our best ally in the world. Now think about this. Name one time in the last 20 years the French stood by us with anything. But in Barack Obama's eyes, that makes them our best ally because they fought what was in the best interest of our country. It's a scary thought, isn't it? That the president would look at a country that has repeatedly rebuffed our attempts to try to positively influence the world and sees that country as the one that he's closest to. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a president who not only apologizes for America, but consistently makes our country less safe. Look at what he's doing with the nuclear Iran threat. Nothing. He's been pushed and pulled to try to put sanctions on Iran, even though he objected to them, didn't want them to happen. Finally has put them in place. And now says, oh, Iran can't get a nuclear weapon, a country that has already called repeatedly for the destruction of the state of Israel. It is potentially in the final stages of getting a weapon that could do just that. And the president gives lip service and does nothing to stop this radical theocracy, which is the equivalent of having Al-Qaeda in charge of a country. Does nothing to stop them. We will pay a heavy price. Our allies will pay a heavy price if they are not stopped. We don't want to start a war. We want to prevent a radical theocracy that is doing more to pervade terror around the world, and yes, even in this country. We want to stop them from having a shield so they can do so with impunity. So on top of that, now the president's decided he's going to unilaterally disarm America almost with our nuclear weapons force. It wasn't bad enough that we had a horrible treaty with the Russians that he negotiated. But now he's going to unilaterally try to draw down our missile strength. A missile capability that is already questionable in its efficiency and effectiveness. He's cut the defense budget already by $500 billion and has proposed another $500 billion. While every other area of the government has exploded. We can't afford, he says. We can't afford to defend ourselves. We can afford to grow the welfare state, make more people dependent so he can get more votes. He's dismantling America's military. He's making us a laughingstock around the world. And that's probably the highlight of his administration when you compare it to what he's done to this economy and our culture. Ladies and gentlemen, under the Santorum administration, our friends would know they are our friends, our enemies would respect us, and if they don't respect us, they fear us. Look at the situation here at home. We have a president who has put us in hock, on the brink of bankruptcy. And yet, his budget announcement this week is more of the same. $1 trillion deficits. Almost as far as the eye can see. Oh, he says they're going to be less. Yeah, if we pass massive tax increases, which aren't going to happen. If we do big budget cuts, which under his tutelage we've never seen, other than in defense. He plays political games with any time that anyone suggests that we have to change the entitlements in our country. 60% of the budget's entitlements. 60%, yes, they're off limits. 17% is defense. When I was born, 60% was defense. And less than 10% was entitlements. Where's the problem, folks? It's not defense. It's the growth of the welfare state. It's the growth of the dependency class. And so already 60% of the budget is entitlements. And so guess what the president's biggest accomplishment was? A new entitlement called Obamacare. A $2+ trillion new entitlement over the next 10 years. That's actually going to be more if you look at the numbers now. It's going to dramatically increase the deficit. It's going to drive up health care costs. It's going to reduce the quality of your care and access to care. And it's going to do what we've seen over the last few days. When government can go out and pledge to you and promise you they're going to take care of you. Just give us the authority and we will provide for you. We will give you the right to health care. That was the siren song that Barack Obama sold. Interestingly enough, the American public didn't buy it. 60-some% were against it. And he shoved it down our throats. And now here we are. Healthcare costs continue to go up. Premiums are going up faster because of the mandates of Obamacare. And we're on the precipice, if we do not win this election, of having every man, woman, and child in America now dependent upon the federal government for your life and your health. When that happens, America, as we know it, changes. We always talk about the tipping points. You hear this talk, you've probably heard it, that about half the people in this country, almost half, don't pay any federal income tax. So we're worried about what happens if now more than half. Well, how about almost half of the American public receive some sort of government benefit? What happens now when 100% do? What are going to be the incentives to either shrink and grow government? I'll give you an example of what the incentives are. A few months ago when we were going through the debt, raising the debt ceiling, President Obama was not having a good time of it. His position was increasingly unpopular, just to pass a debt ceiling, don't cut anything. So he went out to the American public, held a press conference, and asked them to call their members of Congress and tell them to pass the debt ceiling increase. Don't cut any spending, just pass the increase. He said to the American public, did he say to them, let me explain to you why I feel this way. Let me explain the details. Let me explain the problems. No. Did he use high soaring rhetoric as to why it was our responsibility and duty to do so? No. What did he do? He looked at the camera and said, you, Social Security recipient, you're not going to get your check unless you call and make sure they pass that debt ceiling. You, Medicare recipient, you're not going to get your bills paid for. You, the spouse of a man or woman serving in uniform, you're not going to get your paycheck. That's the lofty rhetoric of someone who has a string attached to Americans and pulls it when he needs them to do what he wants them to do. And what happened? The switchboards were flooded of people afraid. Afraid because they were in fact dependent upon the government. Now imagine every American who's in that position, who needs that test, who needs that procedure done, or to see that doctor. Margaret Thatcher said when she left the Prime Ministership of England that she was never able to accomplish what Reagan was able to accomplish, to transform the UK back to a society that was not dependent upon government. And she had a much tougher go of it. She had a lot of nationalized industries in the UK, and she did a great job, but she said she failed. The reason she said she failed, the British national healthcare system. She said once people are dependent, it's almost impossible to break that dependency. Here we are, folks, at a time when government is crushing business. How many business people I talk to, small business people in particular, the kind of businesses that are in Brown County and the big red counties that cross this country. It's the little guy, the farmer, the rancher. It's the insurance agent. It's the mortgage broker. It's the small manufacturer. It's the local retailer or restaurateur, the dry cleaner. How many of them are being crushed and seeing the burden of regulation from the federal government just continue to go up and make it harder and harder? And just the uncertainty of what's next. It's, in the Obamacare bill, there's 700 places where it says in that bill, the Secretary of Health shall do something, promulgate some rule, some regulation to tell you how to run your life or your business. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the future. That's what's making this. Americans are a great and free people. We like to get out and we like to run. When you put a heavy yoke upon us, we don't act very well. We're not like, your ancestors who came from a country or countries that were used to being ruled. My grandfather came to this country back in 1925. He came first to the city of Detroit, worked for a couple of years in the auto factory, lost his job, and ended up in the coal fields of western Pennsylvania. I've been back and visited my relatives. They are wonderful people. I enjoyed them very much, but they were nothing like my grandfather. My grandfather had a great job, lived in a beautiful little bucolic town, could have lived his life out in relative peace, but Mussolini had taken charge of Italy. And he wanted his children and grandchildren to be free. He valued that more than security. He valued being able to raise his family and instill the values that he believed in. To be raised in a church that he wanted them to be in. To be able to reap the fruits of their labor and to be able to live their dreams. And so he came and he sacrificed, working in that mine for 30 years till he was 72 years old. Every one of us in this room has that story. Somewhere, maybe even people in this room, who forged freedom because they didn't want to be ruled by a king or an emperor or a socialist bureaucracy. We are different here in America. Our DNA is different. The relatives, like my relatives, who didn't come because they are different. They are happy being ruled. We are not. We are Americans. I've laid forth a plan on how we're going to transform this economy. Focused it on, first, cutting $5 trillion over 5 years, spending less money each year than the year before. Shrinking government. I've laid out a plan to get this economy growing. No, not the public sector economy, the private sector economy. We laid out a plan to throw out the old tax code and replace it with 2 rates and 5 deductions. That's it. 5. Simple. Second, we take the corporate tax. We really help small businesses. Why? Because this complex corporate tax code is just tailor-made for big business. You can employ a compliance department. For regulations, you can employ an audit department or tax department to try to reduce your tax liability, structure your company to make sure that it pays the minimum amount of tax. If you're a small businessman, you can't do any of that. And so when a complex tax code helps the big guy compete against the little guy, we have regulations that help the big guy compete against the little guy. You have your compliance department. I was talking to a mortgage broker the other day who told me that before Dodd-Frank, he spent 30 minutes a week on regulation. Now he spends 3 hours a day, and he's getting out of business. I hear this over and over from every walk of life. They're not growing their business. Why? Well, if you get to 50 employees, then you get Obamacare. Taxes come in. The government is suffocating businesses. So what do? I take the corporate tax, I cut it in half, and make it a flat tax. Everybody pays the same, big and small. And for manufacturers, because I come from a blue-collar town, I know what it's like to be in a town where you get up in the morning and you smell progress. We could do, and we have done a lot to get rid of the smell of progress, both good and bad. But I knew and grew up around folks that worked in the mill or worked at Pullman Standard making rail cars. So I knew that the backbone of our community, my basketball coach, the folks that worked at the COIA, all the folks that participated, build that community. They were working those blue-collar jobs, being part of their local community. And they were being able to raise families. When I was a kid, 21% of the workforce of this country were employed in those kind of jobs. Now it's 9%. Manufacturing jobs pay on average $20,000 more than other jobs in America. The difference between being at the bottom end of the income scale and toward the middle. The ability to be able to take what skills you have and upgrade them so you can get a better quality of life and a better paid job, better benefits. That's now missing in the large swath of America, particularly in rural and small town America. Because if you want to know where most manufacturers are, processors are, they're in small town America. Just about every little town that you go to throughout America, there's either a railroad crossing, a river port, or a processing plant, or a manufacturing facility that town built around. And we've seen over the last 40 or 50 years, as I saw in the steel mills of western Pennsylvania, a lot of those towns withering and dying on the vine because those jobs went to Mexico or China or who knows where else. And people said, you know, Rick, I heard this for years. Those days are gone. We're never going to have those days come back. We're not. We're not going to have the days back when we're going to have 50,000 people employed in the mill. We have much too much productivity for that. But we can have 50,000 people employed in 1,000 manufacturing facilities using smart technology with upgraded skills so they can get upgraded wages, with the training capability to be able to take folks who are now working in minimum wage or just above jobs and give them the ability to rise in society. You create wealth by making things. And the more we can make things here in America, the more that wealth is created by the great innovation that still takes place in America. We still innovate, we still create the new products of the world, the new drugs of the world, the new devices of the world. But fewer and fewer are made here, which means the wealth that is accumulated here does not trickle down to the rest. Why? Because America is uncompetitive. Not in the form of labor costs. Let's set those aside. But for every other aspect, we are 20% more costly than the rest of the world. Why? Taxes and regulation. And so what do? We eliminate the corporate tax on manufacturers, and we abolish every single regulation that is in place, that Obama put in place, that cost the business more than $100 million a year. We need regulations and regulators, but we need them with the attitude that we want you here in America. We want you to make things here in America. We want you to succeed in America. We want you to comply with our laws. But we're not here to punish you. We're here to work with you. We're here to make sure that you have an opportunity to succeed, because when you succeed, America succeeds. That's the attitude of the government. We're not going to be successful economically, even if we cut spending, balance the budget, decrease taxes, create jobs. All of those things will be great. But if the families and the communities of America continue to break down, we're not going to see the kind of economic prosperity that we've seen in the past. That's just a fact. In America today, if you're married with children, the chances of you, not the chances, but the rate of poverty in America is about 8% in two-parent families. In single-parent families, as heroic as most single moms and some single dads are, poverty rate is much higher. Why? Because Not only do single moms and single dads have to go out and provide, but they have to nurture, they have to care, they have to be, well, do 2 jobs instead of 1. And it's harder. Ask my wife. She knows. I'm not home very much anymore. And so I know it's harder. It's harder for everyone. And as a result, the poverty rate is a lot higher, almost 40%. The Greek word for economy, the word for economy comes from the Greek word home. The home is the first economy. If the home suffers, the economy cannot get stronger. Part of building a strong America is building a strong family structure again in America. It's having you need to have a policy that helps nurture and support the institution of marriage, not try to dissemble it. But stand up for the institution of marriage between man and woman. Stand up for those healthy marriages. You need to be supportive of fathers taking responsibility for their children, even those who are outside of the home. I was talking to Chuck Colson the other day, who's the founder of a group called Prison Fellowship. When he left prison in 1975, there were 250,000 people in America in prison. There are now 2.5 million people in prison in America. And 70 to 80% of them grew up without a father in the home. We know. We all do. We all know how important it is to have mothers and fathers together as much as possible. But we make it harder in America. Our culture continually devalues that relationship. Our government makes it more costly. You know, under Obamacare, you pay thousands more. You pay thousands more under Obamacare if you're married than if you're living together. We have laws in this country, and for Medicaid. I just talked to a man the other day in North Dakota, but I've talked to others who told me that his wife has health problems and he's having trouble taking care of her. So they went in to look for help, and they said, "We'll give you help. Divorce her." Is that where we are in America? Folks, we have a culture that is in need of renewal. Is it going to come from the government? No. But we need to have a national discussion about what will make this country great again, and families is at the core. Big things are at stake. Our family, our faith. You know, you never thought in America we would actually be having the discussion that we've had over the last weeks. Did we really ever think that the government of our country would say to you, "We will tell you how to spend your money," faith institution, church. "We will tell you whether what you do is part of your faith expression or whether we think it's not, and therefore we can tell you what to do. We can tell you to do things that you consider to be gravely immoral, that you consider to be a sin, that you consider to be unhealthy and wrong. But the government says our values trump your religious values. Everybody knows in the case of the Catholic Church, and when the government has been so kind as to give you the right to health care, they can tell you how to exercise that right to health care. And they can fine you and punish you if you don't do what we tell you with this right that we're giving you. But there was a case decided just a few weeks before this, which makes this rule even more stunning in its overreach. Because the United States Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, in a case called Hosanna Table, where the administration, the Obama administration, argued that they could impose employment discrimination statutes against churches, synagogues, Hosanna Table, synagogue, that they could impose employment discrimination criteria on the church's hiring of ministers in the church. A 9-0 decision. I think it was Justice Kagan who asked the Obama solicitor during oral argument, it seems to me that you're saying that you could require, say, the Catholic Church to hire women priests, otherwise they would be discriminating against women. And the answer was, well, yes, I guess you could say. How far have we lost our rights and freedoms? How much have we now given to the government? This is only the beginning, folks. This is only the beginning. The more power and authority you give government, and look, have you heard of this case? Has the press covered it at all? No. And what have they turned this issue into? Oh, it's an issue of contraception with the church. It's not. It's an issue of freedom. It's an issue of government control of your lives. What does the government have a business of telling you what should be in your insurance policy in the first place? Much less make you buy one. Folks, ultimately that's what this election's about. All of the things I've discussed boil down to one thing. Do you believe that government should be dictating and controlling every aspect of your life, or more and more? That we are a great country because we were built from the top down? Do you believe that this country is great because we were built from the bottom up? Barack Obama answered that question. He answered that question. He actually didn't even ask the question. He just sort of made a statement. He was responding to Paul Ryan's budget last spring. And he was criticizing him for undermining the safety net programs in America. All of these entitlement programs. He went up listed them all. And he said, after listing all these entitlement programs, America is a greater country because of these commitments. And as he read off his teleprompter, this man down there is flipping cards real fast so I can keep up with his speech. As he read off his teleprompter, and I say that because this was not an off-the-cuff remark. This is something he read. Maybe he wrote it, maybe he didn't. He read it, so he owns it. And this is what he said. I'll go one step further. America was not a great country until these days. So until the government took your money, gave it to smart people in Washington who know better how to allocate it than you do, and redistribute it to those who are in need according to them, or who are a favorite group according to them, America was not a great country. You see, I believe America was founded great. America was founded I carry around my Constitution of the United States. And that, I always know when there are Tea Party people around. Thank you for re-energizing America's consciousness with respect to the Constitution. The Constitution is the owner's manual, the operator's manual of America. It is how we are to run our government. It is the how of America. But as any good Tea Partier knows, the Constitution by itself is insufficient. It's insufficient because it doesn't provide the why. It doesn't provide who we are. That is provided in America's birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence. You heard this term, American exceptionalism. What is it? Is it because we are ethnically exceptional? Well, obviously not. We are about as ethnically diverse a society as ever existed in human history. So it's not our ethnicity. That's not what it means to be an American. We're all hyphenated Americans. So American can't be about ethnicity or race or creed. So what does it mean to be an American? I always use the example of my grandfather. All of your ancestors. You become an American when you step on American soil and you accept the values that are at the heart of our country. America is about an ideal. It's about a shared set of values. And that's why I hear people say, I debated Howard Dean the other day. Remember Howard Dean, right? And Howard Dean said, was asked the question by a student, what's the greatest strength of America? You know what he said? Our diversity. Absolutely wrong. Oh, it is a strength, but ultimately for so many countries, it is a destructive weakness unless e pluribus unum. Unless out of many, one. And so how with all this diversity can we agree? I go back to this founding document, which most Americans, although an increasing number, on the progressive left, who would like to dispense with the Declaration, who would like to move it off the stage into the shadows so they can just have this Constitution alone, a living, breathing Constitution alone. You see, a Constitution can live and breathe and change if it is not anchored to something eternal. That's what the Declaration does. In the words that you all know. The words that I'm sure are still taught in schools like this in Brown County. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the heart of America. That we are all equal. According to the secular left, the ones who would like to move that declaration off because of its mention of 4 times God in one form or another. Like to move that off, that we have God-given rights. Because once we have God-given rights, God who gives us rights, what comes with rights? Responsibilities. When God gave us rights, as he did, he also gave us laws by which to exercise those rights. The Ten Commandments, and more. Our founders understood this. John Adams said when the Constitution was ratified, or drafted, he said, our Constitution, this Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the governance of many others. Why? Because a Constitution with radical freedom, which we had with the Bill of Rights, a Constitution with radical freedom without a people that is grounded in moral, good, upstanding behavior is, well, the French Revolution. The French Revolution had a constitution not dissimilar to the American Constitution. But the French Revolution was not based on God-given rights. It was based on three things. Equality, good. Liberty, good. Fraternity, problematic. Where do we get our rights from? Paternity, God. Where do they get their rights from? Where do their rights derive? From each other. From whoever has the levers of power. This is what the Supreme Court is moving toward. This is why Ginsburg doesn't like our Constitution, much less our Declaration. Because they want to create the rights and responsibilities. If we cut loose from the Declaration, cut loose from God-given rights, cut loose from the moral enterprise that is America, then we leave a very cold, dangerous, frightening America for your children. That's why this election is the most important election in your life. Every generation has an obligation. You are, in my book, my book, by the way, that I wrote about 6 years ago, in response to Hillary Clinton's book called It Takes a Village. I wrote It Takes a Family. And I used Russell Kirk's definition of conservatism, because the subtitle of my book is Conservatism and the Common Good. Russell Kirk's definition was conservatism is the stewardship of patrimony. The stewardship, in the case of America, of a great inheritance. We are stewards, not owners of America. We hold this country for but a period of time. And our job is to be good stewards, to take this inheritance and enrich it for future generations. That is the charge of every generation. Many generations can do so somewhat easily, without much sacrifice or toil or struggle. Others have had huge responsibilities to bear, to keep that torch alive through war, through economic distress. I always talk about the greatest generation. Why were they great? Were they great because they were better than any of us? They were great because greatness was thrust upon them. A great struggle. And they lived up to that struggle. And they handed off a great and more powerful nation to the challenge that they had to meet. And so it is with us in a very different way. Our founders who created freedom wrote often that in some sense creating freedom was the easy part. Winning freedom was certainly hard, but maintaining freedom, the longer every civilization goes on, the flame tends to flicker and lessen as people get away from the brightness of the flame that started this great experiment. It is the job of the course of time that erodes everything. The average length of any great civilization throughout history is usually 200 years. And here we stand as a testament that we are different, but it is our responsibility. Our founders, when they signed that document, pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Who did they pledge it to? Who did they pledge it to? They pledged it to each other. We pledge to each other. We have a common bond as Americans. We have a responsibility to each other in our families and our communities to keep Brown County strong, Georgetown strong, Ohio strong, and free. In America, we pledge to each other. No one's asking for your life. No one's asking for your fortune. But I am asking you to put your honor on the line. The honor of the family that you now represent in the line of ancestors who did their duty to give you the country that we have today. The forefathers of this town and this county who built what you're staying in here, they sacrificed. They kept the flame of freedom burning. If we are not successful here in Ohio, in winning this election in 2012, then I fear this flame will diminish to the point of it being extinguished. You are the epicenter, it seems like, in every election. This is your duty. First, to give us the nominee that has the best chance of winning this election and governing this country. And secondly, going out and working between now and that time and making sure that the great state of Ohio doesn't make the mistake that it made last time. We've been making mistakes in Pennsylvania since 1988. I'll make a deal. I win Pennsylvania, you win Ohio, and let's go get a new president of the United States.